So the question is remote working right for your business? There's a lot of talk on social media, various other platforms, about whether remote working is something that they should incorporate, or all companies should incorporate, not just from candidates wanting or liking the idea of remote working, but from companies now seriously looking at it. It used to be something that only perhaps companies might look at if they couldn't afford offices or were very small, and perhaps they didn't have the resources to attract people and wanted it as perhaps some kind of lure. However, now it's being seen as something which is a very viable option. So the question really is, regardless of your company, is remote working right for your company? Remote working isn't just working from home, as some people might think. This might be working in a cafe, working in your car, working on a beach if you want, working somewhere that's comfortable for the employee. They might want a work-life balance. They might want to be in a position where commuting is a problem. If you're based in central London, for example, or any big city, just getting there in the morning could be a nightmare. There are cities now, we're based in Bristol, for example, and recently a legislation is being pushed through that looks like it's going to come to fruition at the time of recording, where they will put a ban on diesel vehicles entering the city centre. There'll be an allowance on commercial vehicles, but if you're a commuter, you've got a diesel car, as many cars are these days, and you can't get to work in the morning, or you're going to be at risk of fine or having to pay a large amount of money for that privilege, is that really going to be something that's going to suit you? So there's various reasons for remote working. There's various things that can help someone be in a position where they could be based where they want to be based. So remote working isn't just about working from home. It could be based on, in cafes, or even on holiday on a beach in Spain. You could work anywhere remotely, theoretically, as long as you have the equipment you need, whether it be a laptop, tablet-based computer. You're going to need some form of internet connection, probably broadband, certainly if it's a software-based role, and probably a telephone or telecommunications equipment, so that you can get that information sent to and from, and be able to have the software and the hardware needed to do the job in the first place. But as long as you have that equipment, theoretically, you could be remote anywhere you want. You can do it wherever you like. Now, just to clarify, this channel is about being objective about making decisions. It's not about looking at what is right or wrong. It's about exploring both arguments, or varying arguments for a particular question or conversation, and looking at what the best objective outcome of it is. Now, there really are two schools of thought when it comes to remote working, depending on who you're speaking to. Some are for remote working, and some are very much against remote working. So who's actually the kind of people that are for remote working? For remote working people tend to a lot of the time be the employees first and foremost. One of the things that might be important to you to start off is the ability to have a little bit of freedom, have a little bit of trust. You might want more of a work-life balance. When you're a remote worker, you're not tied down to having to go to an office. If you have to sit there and commute, for example, and your normal commute is an hour to work or an hour from work, and you can be based from home, when you finished your day, immediately you're already at home. You've also got to take into account costs. Costs themselves can be very, very high when you're going to offices, or you're having to get your car, or park in places, or you're getting a train or other forms of public transport. They can soon mount up. Other people who are very much for remote working might be people in a position where they have all the tech and everything they need to do the job from home. And they're simply in a position where it's just unnecessary for them to go to an office. So if you're asking them, can you come to an office, for what benefit from them? Many of these people are looking at it thinking, there's no need, I can do this from home. There are other reasons for remote working as well. It might be people's individual circumstance, preferences. They might be in a position where they've been in the office for a long time, they don't need any more training, they know the job that they're doing inside out. So realistically, going to an office adds no benefit to them. It doesn't enable them to do their job better. And in many ways, it might actually add more distraction from them being able to do the job in the timescales, to the quality, and to their best ability. So what about companies being for remote working? Now, some companies are in a position where they're actually founded now by people who have started companies because they didn't want to be in an environment where they're tied to a desk. They're built for remote workers. So those companies themselves, their whole value basis may be around remote working. Some big companies are looking at remote working as an option. They recognise that office space is at a premium. Do you need an office? Do you need a facility with hundreds of people working there. How many of those people could work remotely? Therefore, you could save costs on office space, you could save costs on parking. If you've got a canteen, you can cut down on that. If you can almost have your workers almost outsourced, even though they're employees of your business, you can have them working separately from your business. That can save a business an awful lot of money. So who are the actual people against remote working? The classic consensus of people who are against remote working are the employers themselves. They're trying to build working cultures. They're trying to be in a position where they might have younger workers that can look up to the more experienced people as example setters. It might be in a position where it's a lot more convenient for them if they need to hold an impromptu meeting, training session, something like that. One other argument is that if you give people an inch, they will take a mile. Now, some would agree with this, some would disagree with this. It really depends on whether you're an X or a Y manager. Could they be working on other tasks at the same time? If you're a manager or if you're a senior person asking someone to utilise their expertise for your benefit and you don't know their skill set, how can you judge how long it takes them to be able to do a particular task? If they said to you, it's going to take me 3 days to do this particular task, I'm on a day rate and you're none the wiser, when in reality it would take 3 hours to do the task that they're asking them to do, what could they be doing in those 3 days? They could be working on someone else's project. You don't know. So a lot of it is trust. If you have someone out of mind, out of trust, the company, quite rightly, is in a position where they need to know they can trust that person. If you're paying someone to do a job, is it really that unreasonable to ask them to come to the office? You also have to consider the employee's perspective of people who are against it. A lot of the time it's very much about the employer, but some employees might not want to work from home. I've worked from home and I've worked from an office. I found that working at home, although I very much enjoyed the idea of it initially, I did find it quite a lonely experience. Some people like the interaction, banter in the office, communication, the physical interaction. When you're there with them, you can see their reaction, you can have a laugh, you can have fun, you can have that engagement on a social perspective. Maybe not even when you're working, but just on your break, being able to talk to someone. That can be very important, certainly for your mental health. Another reason why an employee might not want to work remotely is that working from home is one thing, but what about if they're working from cafes, if they're working from their car, they're working from other places? If you're driving around in your car, they don't want to be talking or having complex conversations where you really need to think about it on the phone while you're driving. You might want to sit there and make some notes. You might want to sit there and, have a bit of a think or have some time to consider certain things, check a bit of paperwork, check someone else out, check a website where you're speaking to them on the phone. You can't do that while you're driving. If you're working from a cafe or another location remotely, even a beach, can you really sit there and have conversations with customers or suppliers or whoever, whether you're doing a product or a service-based business, when you're sat there in a public location? You might feel uncomfortable talking about money and investment and all that kind of stuff, and might feel quite vulnerable from people listening into your call. You've got to think of legislation such as GDPR in Europe. That's something that you can't really be discussing personal details. If your job's personal details, if your job's about that kind of stuff, you cannot discuss that stuff publicly. One other question is who actually benefits from remote working? Some would argue that, well, of course it's a benefit to an employee. They have the flexibility to work wherever they want. They have that option. But if you're in a certain job where it's difficult to be able to discuss on the phone or to communicate effectively as you need in any public place, you'll need to work alone somewhere. Often that's going to be from a home office. But if you're someone who doesn't like working on your own, that can be incredibly isolating. If the company has said, well, that's how we're going to do things, that's the only way things are, and that employee doesn't feel comfortable being on their own all the time, they may be in a position where they'll want to leave that employment. It might not suit them. When it comes to a company, if they are in a position where what they need is there and then, they need to be agile to certain situations, they need to hold an impromptu meeting, an impromptu training session, they want to do certain things, they need to have interaction with staff, they want to get people talking about something, they want to hold a meeting. If you're in a position where all of your staff are remote, you might think, well, theoretically you could do a video conference. How long do they take to set up? They can take some time. So realistically, remote working can have real inconveniences for a business, and understandably, having all of your staff in one place at one time can suit the business a lot better. Remote working cannot just be seen as a benefit for the employee, it has to also be seen as a benefit for the company. Bear in mind, for a company to exist, to thrive, it needs to have people that can work together and work effectively to get the desired results. If there is a hindrance on getting those results by allowing all your staff to work from home, where actually you get better results if they were all in one location, then I can understand why a company would want to have those people in that environment. If your business is in a position where it's critical that those people are there, present on a particular day, then having them working from home on a permanent basis may not be right for your business. So where will remote working work, and where will remote working be unlikely to work? Well, I've seen posts on LinkedIn of people saying remote working is the future. It's the only way. Everybody needs to do remote working. In my opinion, that is probably a little bit narrow-minded, because certain professions, that's impossible. You can't, for example, have remote working prison guards. Who would look after the prison? You can't have remote working police officers. I don't know if I want to come to work today, I'll work from home or work from a beach in Spain. You can't have that. Certain jobs, practically, you can. If it's a job which requires technology as a particular role, where you're literally using a computer, and all of the work that you'll be doing could be emailed or transferred or stored on a device and sent in separately, or it's a project-based role where you could go away, do it separately, and then bring the finished project to the employer, then it is practical. It cannot work for most professions out there. You can't sit there and expect a bus driver or anyone in transport or haulage or anything involved in hospital or medical professions, all of these types of professions, to be remote. You cannot do it. You have to have people present, people there at that particular time. So you have to decide whether for your business it's a practical option. If it's not a practical option, you cannot explore it. Realistically, if you're already considering that, of whether you can make it a practical option for your business, you need to take into account a few factors. Your workers themselves, will they have the equipment and the resources to be able to do the job that they need to do remotely? Will they have the time? Will they be in a position where you can look at them and think, this person's effective without my supervision? It's all very well having an employee doing a job remotely, but if they're not trained correctly to do the job, or they're not in a position where they have the knowledge and the know-how to do all of the things independently without supervision, you could be leaving them into a position where the results and the performance and the outcomes of that remote working could be compromised. If you had a staff member who you didn't need to speak to at any time all day long, and at the end of it they would still have all of the equipment and they just worked in the office, they could probably be in a position where they could work from home. If your business is a business which requires people to be there for legal reasons, medical reasons, health and safety reasons, purely practical reasons, it's a hands-on job, you can't have everybody remote working. If your business is a business which is technology based, which is very much a business where you have experienced people, you only maybe employ experienced people who don't need supervision, they don't need training, you're not going to require them to do regular impromptu meetings or be in a position where they're present for training other staff, and you can afford to do that as an operation, then remote working very much could work for you. But you need to consider all of the options first. Trying out remote working with the approach of thinking, well, let's see how it goes, and then not taking into account all of the pros and cons before doing it, just in order to keep staff happy, may not work for your business. The second you go down that route and you go, right, we'll trial it for a couple of months, then all of a sudden realise it won't work for your business, and then get all the people back in, you could have a bit of a backlash from your staff. You really need to assess whether it can work for your business and communicate it effectively to your staff. It's not just about going along with what your staff want to do. It's also about looking what is practical and what is realistic for your business. If you're an employee looking at remote working, you have the experience, you have the equipment, you have the support, you don't need the training, you don't need the input of an employer, then no wonder remote working might work for you. If you're an employee, however, who doesn't have enough training, doesn't have all the equipment, and for whatever reason cannot get all the equipment, or needs support, or do need supervision, even if you don't want to admit it, it may be better to work for somebody else in an office or in a physical location rather than remote working. Because if you can get the training, development you need, then by all means you could go back, start working for a company in a physical location, get the training, get the support, get all the stuff that you need, and then you could go and do remote working from there and be effective in it and make a career of it. So to summarise, remote working will work for some people. It will work for some companies and it will work for some employees, but it definitely won't work for some companies and some employees equally. You need to take into account all of the factors before going in and exploring remote working. If it doesn't work for your business, even if your employees want it and it's going to compromise what you can do as an operation, then it's something that you realistically cannot look at. You need to communicate that effectively with your staff. If you've not seen this channel before, click the bell icon, subscribe, join. We're going to post videos on a regular basis. If you have any comments or you want to see any videos particularly, do let us know.